Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to unpack something kind of fascinating and, let's be honest, sometimes super frustrating about the human brain. We're talking about that weird link between how confident someone seems and, how competent they actually are.
You know the scene, right? I mean, we've all been there. You're in a meeting, maybe a classroom, or just chatting with friends, and you see it, that one person who's speaking with just absolute, unshakable certainty. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I'm not so sure they've got their facts straight. Well, it turns out that's not just something you've noticed. There's a real psychological principle behind this whole thing.
And yeah, that principle has a name. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It was named after David Dunning and Justin Kruger, the two social psychologists who first really dug into it and described what was going on.
So, what does that really mean? Well, think of it like a mental blind spot. Here's the crazy part. The very skills you need to be good at something, they're often the exact same skills you need to realize you're, not so good at it. So if you lack those skills, you literally don't have the tools to see your own shortcomings. You don't know enough to know you don't know enough. And that's where this huge and often totally unearned confidence comes from. And this right here really shows that bizarre inverse relationship, doesn't it? On one side, you've got the beginner. They have very little actual skill, but their confidence can be through the roof. Then, on the other side, you have the true expert. Because they understand the topic so deeply, they're way more aware of all the complexities, all the nuances, all the things they still don't know. And that often leads to a more moderate, much more careful kind of confidence.
Okay, so that's the what. We've named the phenomenon, but what about the why? I mean, what's the underlying engine that lets this kind of overconfidence take hold and just stick around? To get that, we need to dive into a concept called cognitive rigidity.
Right. So picture all your beliefs and all your knowledge as a kind of building, an architecture inside your mind. Now, cognitive flexibility is your ability to renovate that building, to update it, maybe even knock down a wall or two when new, better information comes along. Cognitive rigidity, on the other hand, is when that architecture is basically set in concrete. It's completely resistant to any updates no matter how strong the evidence is. And this is the absolute key takeaway. This connection is so powerful. If a person just can't or won't update their beliefs, then they can't process the feedback that would show them where they're going wrong. This mental inflexibility basically creates the perfect breeding ground for that misplaced confidence to not just pop up, but to really dig in and thrive. So how does this all play out in the real world? Let's break down how this internal bias actually shows up in people's behavior. We can think of them as 6 subtle but pretty telling signs of this kind of thinking. First up, and this one is probably the most fundamental, is just a plain old lack of curiosity. Someone who is cognitively rigid doesn't really ask questions like why or what if, and why would they? In their mind, they've already got all the answers they need, so searching for new knowledge just feels pointless. Okay, you've definitely heard this one before. Oh, it's just common sense. This phrase is a classic. It's often used to just shut down a conversation, right? It treats a person's own gut feeling like it's some kind of universal truth, a substitute for any real evidence or actual expertise. This one is a biggie. When a new or different viewpoint comes up, the reaction isn't to consider it, it's to just dismiss it. Instantly. Any idea that challenges what a person already thinks is treated like a threat that needs to be shot down, not as a chance to maybe learn something or refine their own position. This is that pattern of seeing the world in simple absolutes. Everything is either right or wrong, good or bad. There's just no room for nuance, for complexity, for any of the shades of gray that make up, reality. It makes the world seem simple, sure, but it's also a really dangerous way to misinterpret it. Oh man, this one is everywhere these days, especially with the internet. This is the belief that, say, 5 minutes of Googling something makes your opinion just as good as, or even better than, the conclusions of people who have spent their entire lives studying a topic. And finally, because a rigid thinker just isn't open to feedback or new info, they really struggle to learn from their mistakes. You'll see them try the same failed strategy over and over and over again, because they just can't adapt their approach, even when it's clearly not working.
So why are we talking about all this? What's the point? Why is it so crucial to understand these patterns, not just in the world around us, but maybe even more importantly in ourselves?
Look, the whole point here isn't to get better at pointing fingers and saying, aha, Dunning-Kruger to other people. No way. The real goal is to work on our own intellectual humility. It's about being able to recognize that we all have blind spots. It's about staying open to the idea that we might be wrong, and embracing that true competence is a lifelong journey. It's not some finish line you cross, it's the road you travel.
So,
We're going to leave you with this final thought. The real challenge, and where the real growth happens, is when you turn that lens around and point it at yourself. It's pretty easy to spot these signs in other people, right? But it is so much harder and so much more valuable to find them in ourselves. So, here's a question for you. What's one core belief you have that you've never really truly questioned? Now that's a question we're thinking about.